Good afternoon. How are you there? Welcome to this wonderfully, hopefully useful to you, Google Digital Garage webinar, all about how to keep your family safe online. My name's Christine, and I shall be your trainer for the day. So what do you need to know? As I say, my name's Christine, and I am one of the trainers here on Google's digital training program, the Google Digital Garage. I've been part of Google's Digital Garage since about 2015, and I do love getting to know everyone during these sessions. I've been a marketeer for most of my life, but for the purposes of this training, I'm also a really keen to get involved with the keeping your family safe online as a parent, because that is probably the most important role that I have in my life at the moment and for the hopefully many years to come. Alongside me today I have our wonderful moderator Annie. Now Annie is also one of our Google Digital Garage coaches, and she's also been working on the programme for quite a few years now. So she's super experienced, and she's in the chat right now. She'll be answering your questions as we go. She'll be sharing some really useful, hopefully, links with you. And she'll basically just be keeping everything up and running. You can identify her by her name. She is called Annie, and she does have a little blue spanner next to her name, and that shows that she is the one in charge this afternoon. Little bit of housekeeping for you. First up, in order to chat with Annie, you're going to need to go to the chat and be signed in to a YouTube account. If you're not signed in already, head up to the box on the right there. You can sign up or sign in, and dead quick and simple to do, no charge to do that. Get yourself signed in, and then you'll be able to join in with that chat. By the time you've done that and come back, we'll be all ready to start, I'm sure. If you have any trouble viewing the webinar now or as we go through, best thing to do is just start by refreshing that page, and hopefully that'll fix most of the problems people have. I am going to pause throughout the session. We've got tons to talk about today, but I will pause as we go through the session. So do get those questions into Annie, and if she thinks there's a question that it would be great for the whole group to hear the answer to, she's going to ping those over to me and we'll answer them live on air together, which is why these sessions can really reflect what it is that you want to know. So make sure you do let me know, or let Annie know, what's on your mind today. As you know, so you do know, we're running this Google Digital Garage virtual training as part of our broader offering of courses. So if you want to check out the schedule of upcoming training, then click down on the link through to our website. You'll click, it's in the description below, go through to our website, and you will be able to see what we've got coming up and see other opportunities for you to get involved. There's a lot of information going to be coming at you. What I would like for you to do, if possible, is to take your notes as you go through, enjoy the webinar, ask your questions. If you think that there's something, I need to come back and do a little bit of a rewatch on, we'll keep this webinar live till about lunchtime tomorrow for you. So if you jot down the time code on the video, that'll help you to fast forward to the right place in the webinar as you rewatch it, if you need to do that. Okay, that's, I think, all the housekeeping done. So let's get started and let's look at how we go about keeping your family safe online. Because what we have is, with lots of the work we do, we want to build collaboration and partnerships. So Google have a deep understanding of technology, as you can imagine. But there's an amazing organisation called Internet Matters, and they have fantastic expertise and focus on guiding parents through the many issues that they might experience when they're using the internet. So that technological expertise on Google's part, plus the work and the expertise that Internet Matters have, made them perfect partners to create and deliver this course. Internet Matters are a non-for-profit organisation, and they have a simple purpose, which is to empower parents and carers to keep children safe in the digital world. And just before we carry on, actually, that's a really important part. This session was originally, I guess, designed with the needs of parents in mind. But actually, when we looked at it a bit deeper, we realised that there are lots of people who, for whatever reason, have a role to play in guiding the children in their lives. So maybe you're an auntie or an uncle, or a cousin to older, an older cousin to younger kids. Maybe you are a scout leader, or you're involved in some kind of youth group, and you therefore want to, you have a responsibility, and you have the idea that you'd like to keep those children in your care as safe as possible. So whether parents, grandparents, aunties, uncles, teachers, pretty much anyone who feels they need support and guidance in this area, this session is for you. I will sometimes default to parents and carers as a shortcut, but I really want you to make sure that you feel that this is inclusive, and we are, as I say, anybody who has a care for those children. We want you to be well educated about web safety, and have a great, strong understanding of what that might mean to help keep the people that you care for safe and secure once online. So that being said, we're going to break that down into 3 sections for you today. We'll start with a little bit of an introduction to online safety, so we can work out a common understanding of what we mean. And we'll also think about, some key areas of concern that parents have when they're, working through the big life stuff that all kids go through, I guess. Then we'll take a little bit of a look at some of the potential risks, the specific risks that children might face. It's really interesting, actually, that the risks change quite often as the children grow up. Issues that you think of when they're younger become less of an issue, and unfortunately new issues come on in. So it is something that no matter what the age or stage of the children in your care, it is worth just checking in on them, and looking at ways. What we're hoping to do is give you some tools today that you can proactively combat some of those risks and feel like a bit more in control, a bit more deeper understanding of the world, I guess, that our children are growing up in. And then we'll talk about some ways that you can positively have a conversation with your children about internet safety. It's all about having an open dialogue with your child. We are not, here to try and tell you how to do parenting, but there are some conversation starters that, through the work that's been done around this programme, have been often suggested actually by participants. Some of the best suggestions tips that I'll give you today actually came out from other parents during these sessions, things that have been tried and tested, things that you can try and see how they work for you. So let's have a little think about online safety itself. And we'll start by thinking about some of those key challenges that parents and carers face in that digital age. So here's a thing for you. And hopefully you're going to be taking notes as we go through. I like a pen and some paper rather, for note taking, but whichever way you're going to do it yourself. Jot down for me and just have a think about what your concerns are. And as I say, these are going to be different depending on the age and stage of your child or your children. But what do you think? What concerns you? No right and wrong answers here. What it would be great to happen is if you can then also pop those into the chat and let Annie know. Maybe if you start with, the kind of rough ages, have you got toddlers, or you're in the place to prep for what they're talking about, or are you thinking about older teens? What are the challenges both you face in understanding maybe what's going on, and the challenges that you maybe think they will face? Pop them in there and share with the group. I'm going to keep moving because obviously it takes you a little while maybe to think and then to chat. But if you can pop those into the chat, it really helps us to make sure we tailor the session and make sure we're covering any concerns or challenges that you might have. Because part of the reason for asking this question is to let you know, get you thinking about the fact that you're not, fortunately, not alone in this. Okay. So when this session was being pulled together, parents, we pulled some parents together and focus group, other parents said quite a lot of the same things that we hear time and time again in these sessions. So the first thing to be glad of is that you are not alone. Okay. So many parents share the same or similar worries. All right. So, people say they need to feel more, they want to and need to feel more involved, more engaged, and more educated, because it's hard to be involved and engaged if you're not really sure what's going on. Loads of parents and carers tell us that their children are far more tech savvy than they are. And that's a real, the kids, we all know how quickly they learn things compared to how long it takes our older brains. And they've grown up in a world where tech is just part of their lives, which, depending on how old we are, most of us have had to learn this stuff as adults, which is a very different than being, native digitally to the tools. And they always change as well. Very annoyingly and frustratingly, the technology is moving at a real pace. Now, safety is paramount. I'm concerned with what they get up to when I'm not monitoring them. And, we need to, like any other aspect of growing up, it is something that we need to give kids the framework. But then at some point, we have to trust them. Crossing the road, going to the shops, all of these things are part of growing up. But when it's something we don't really know about ourselves, it can feel very overwhelming. And as I say, you're not alone. Lots of parents have told us these things. Especially with the last couple of years we've had, this is the era of technology, and kids don't play outside anymore, which is a really, I think back to my childhood and how much time we spent outside. I think one of the things I try and do is let my kid be bored. Wonderful things happen when you're not always being entertained. So how can we get our kids to play outside some more? People can pretend to be anyone online. A real big, risk there is for so many reasons, and we'll talk about some of the reasons as we go through. But people can pretend to be anyone, and you don't always know. And obviously, I think kids naturally are more trusting creatures than we as adults. So how do we manage that? And a big coverall, I guess, is I don't want them stumbling across things they shouldn't be stumbling across. And those things, those risks and issues are going to change as they grow. But an overriding matter is how do we deal with those things? So really important to realise, first up, that you aren't alone in this, that lots of people have those same sorts of fears, of challenges. And we're going to try and address together some of these as we go through, because being online, especially for children and younger people, is a part of everyday life. It's especially, as I say, over the last few years with the COVID situation, more and more and more of their lives are being lived online. So 81% of 12 to 15-year-olds use a smartphone to go online. So that phone that they wanted to make sure you could keep in touch with them when they go off to high school is being used because it's a smartphone, not just very few kids, I guess, use it. People indeed, how, we use our phone for so much more than just making phone calls. So 81% of 12 to 15-year-olds use their smartphones to go online. 2/3 of 8 to 11-year-olds, so key stage 2, upper age of primary school, 2/3 of them are playing games online, whether that's on phones, on tablets, or on PCs or other computer devices. And 3/4, just shy of 5 to 7-year-olds, so reception to the end of infants, are using a tablet to go online. So a couple of things, the internet is prevalent in our daily lives. I think of the last couple of years, how much more difficult they would have been if we weren't connected to each other via the internet. The internet does some amazing things. Children will be online from an early age. We can limit it, we can put restrictions around it, but it will happen. And almost like those kids who have never had sugar and then go off and, can suddenly buy their own. I remember they get a little bit of pocket money, they go and just buy all the sweets and go crazy for it. Better for us to teach them and let them try stuff and make sure that they know how to handle what the power that the internet gives us. And just remember, we were a lot older, most of us as parents and carers, when we got this technology. As I say, I was talking to somebody in a different, in a business situation, and we were talking about the fact that at my primary school, there was one computer and it had a room all to itself. Our children have tiny, tiny devices that are more powerful than 50 of those BBC computers that we used to have. Okay. Dr. Linda Papadopoulos often talks about parents experience most things before their children. So we know how to teach our kids to cross the road because somebody taught us, because somebody taught them, because somebody taught them. We know, how it felt to be allowed to go to the shops on our own for the first time, to be trusted with those steps of growing up. Now, unfortunately, for most of us, we can't rely on somebody having taught us. So it's a lot harder. We don't have those same rules around tech usage because most of us came to tech as adults. And I think that's one of the big reasons that so many parents struggle with the thought of keeping their children safe online. It wasn't something we even had to think about it. So things move really quickly in our connected world. And whilst the automatic reaction, that kind of first heart reaction, might be to limit access to tech, tech can be an amazing force for good. And we mustn't let ourselves be frightened into forgetting the positive sides of tech. Access to a wealth of information, learning, homework. You can go and visit art galleries and museums and historical sites without ever having to leave your living room. You can learn things, interactive tools, games that you can learn. Some of which we can do as parents as well. We can learn things. YouTube. If we ever said, I taught myself to knit using YouTube just because I kept saying to anyone, you can learn anything using YouTube. So there's such a lot of great stuff out there. Freedom of expression, finding a voice, finding other people like me, finding those tribes. If you're in a small community and limited by geography, you might not find those people who you feel at home with, feel like you connect with. The internet way can be a great way for young creatives to get started. There again, from learning to publicising the work that they're doing. But it's a complex place, is the internet, and it wasn't built intentionally for children. So there aren't those same structures around some of the access to things. It isn't as regulated as other services that were designed specifically for children. So we can see tech as an enabler. And I don't want anybody, after spending this hour with me today, I really don't want anybody to think, right, no, that's it. We're just going to turn the Wi-Fi off. With power comes responsibility and a need for a real better understanding of what's going on. So a really good thing to do is take a moment and have a think, and you can pop some of these things in the chat if you like, about what your children are actually doing online. This is going to, there again, might be different. You might have several children that you're responsible for. The youngsters might be, learning their alphabet or learning their phonics using online tools and games. Slightly older might be, researching for their project, looking up ways that they can make that World Book Day costume at the last minute. Or, as they get older, are they gaming, downloading things, connecting with friends? What is it? Jot for yourself down, and you can revisit this. Maybe have a chat with them and find out what their kids are actually doing online, because lots of parents think they know what's going on online, but when we speak to teenagers, they don't necessarily think their parents do know what's going on with them. Pop an answer or two in the chat if you'd like. It will be great for you to hear that, so we know what you think might be going on. So do you feel like you have a complete handle on what they're doing online? And do you monitor what's going on? And if you do, how do you do that? Because as I say, it's pretty clear that children are growing up in a very different world to the one we grew up in. The average child of 11 to 16 years old posts 26 times a day on social media. Now, when we say posts, we're not just talking about making their own posts. We are also talking about liking, sharing, favoriting. But, it's a very different world, that feeling of being always on, always connected to the world via those smartphones and other devices. Now, when we think about posting on social media, actually the minimum age for most social media accounts is 13, but 62% of children aged 11 and 12 have a social media profile and are posting online. And as I say, so it's really interesting to think about, okay, if the minimum age is 13, it's 13 for a reason. And what are the consequences, therefore, of 11 and 12-year-olds being there in that unregulated environment? Are they mature enough to be there? They probably think they do, but maybe, we might disagree on that. And a third of children play online against people they haven't met in person. The average daily screen time is over 3 hours a day for children and young people. How does that make you feel? What does that feel like? Digital technology has become a fundamental part of children's lives. So we really need to make sure that we are aware of what's going on, and we equip ourselves in order to guide our children through this important part of their growing up safely. We don't just say, I don't know how to cross a road, therefore I'm not going to learn how to do it. Let's find ways that we'll look at some common areas that you can, look at what children come up against, and we're going to look at strategies as well that you can use. But before I do that, I'm just going to very quickly check in with Annie, see how she's doing. And we can see no questions that she needs me to handle at the moment, which is fantastic. Do feel free to get those questions in as we go. But let's take a look now, because the next section, what we're going to do is define some risks, hopefully address some concerns, and really look at some practical steps and useful tools that can help you. All right, so kinds of the things that parents worry about. Some of those key areas are on screen at the moment. Don't worry if you don't know what any of these are, because we're going to go through them each in turn, starting off with screen time. So screen time's really interesting. This is the amount of time they spend in front of a screen, rather than reading a book, playing outside, doing the homework with pen and paper. So there's lots of different things that go into screen time. And screen time can offer so many opportunities at the touch of a button, but too much of a good thing can have a negative effect on somebody's well-being. So screen time, too much screen time can affect sleep cycles. It's the blue light from screens that tricks our brains into thinking it's still daylight, which can make it difficult to sleep. And it can also become habit forming. We're creatures of habit. So it doesn't take long to get used to being always connected to that smartphone and glancing at it every couple of minutes. So there's that behavior of feeling quite too much screen can make you want more and more and more and more screen time, which can have an effect. Anybody who's ever tried to get a kid to come off their device and go to bed or go to school or eat their food or read a book or do their homework, there's a big resistance to that, which can really affect behavior and affect relationships in families as well, actually. And in terms of brain development, Screen-based entertainment increases central nervous system arousal, which can actually amplify anxiety and can make us feel always on, really switched on all the time. Millennials are more forgetful than OAPs. We have outsourced our memories to our calendars. I'll just set myself a reminder to do this. Don't need to remember that route that I take all the time, but I still put the sat-nav on every time I go. Columbia University found that when people know they'll be able to find information online easily, they're much less likely to form a memory of it. So we don't need to bother creating that memory, because we know we'll always be able to go back and find that answer anytime we like. So our brains are developing in different ways. Now, one of the things that when we first put this program together was almost a case of don't worry too much. While we were in restricted circumstances, be a bit gentle with yourself. Now we're coming out of this, but not all screen time is created equally. So what we recommend is this idea of balance, a balanced digital diet. A balanced digital diet is one that encourages creativity, it encourages learning, and it helps with connections. So it's all about finding that balance between quantity and quality. Staying safe online, which will take a lot of time about, but really thinking about families and how your family you don't want to be, creating issues with screen time that can then lead to disharmony in your family. What we'll look at as we go through is maybe setting some limits around this. Okay, so the first tool that might help you managing screen time is a tool called Google Family Link. Now, Family Link can temporarily lock your child's device at different times of the day. Now, it's interesting, actually. The example we always give is bedtime. Locking the phone at bedtime so that they can't get on, and if they know that an hour before whatever bedtime you decide upon is right for your family, if the phones go off an hour before then, it gives you time to wind down, do your bed, bath, book routines, get them away from that effect of the blue light. I actually found that although that was helpful, what was really useful to me when my kids first got devices was setting a wake-up time, as in not letting them have access to their phone before a time I decided. When we were in lockdowns and things, what was happening is they were wanting to get up earlier and earlier and earlier to play on their phones. Now, I like my lions as much as the next girl, but also I didn't want that detrimental effect on their sleep. So what we have now is there are no phones in our house before school. So the devices are locked in the morning. And of a weekend, they're locked until at least 7:30 because I don't want them waking up early at the weekends. Okay, so think about what works for you as a family. Is it going to be for homework? Is it going to be that you all lock your devices at dinner? You can, with the Family Link, you can actually you can say, right, all devices, off they go. Go and play outside. Go and get out from under my feet, So depending, you can decide as well on different amounts of screen time for different activities. If they're learning, maybe we want to have more screen time than if they're, watching something or playing something. You can see on Family Link has activity reports, which shows which apps your child is using most, which is a great tool. You might decide it would be more that you'd more like to use a carrot rather than a stick approach. So there are tools like Forest apps, which are more gamified. And what you do is you are rewarded in Forest when you leave your phone be. So rather than being rewarded by a little dopamine hit when you keep picking up the phone, this one you set the timer and the trees grow as you don't touch your devices. Okay. So you can find apps, more technology, but that are really helpful to build the right kinds of attitude and behavior towards the devices. But when it comes to approaching it with your children, And as I say, this isn't me trying to tell you how to be a parent, or Google trying to tell you how to be a parent, or Internet Matters trying to do that. What we're going to do is just share some tips that have been, we have found from doing these kinds of sessions that parents have recommended to us as well. And how much time your child spends on their device is completely up to you. But, one thing that is people find really helpful is that, they model the behavior. So not just, if you want your child to come off their phone an hour before bed, make sure you do the same. Set the example, and model whatever behaviors you want to see in your children. Encourage them to do alternative activities, being a bit bored, drawing, colouring, providing those kinds of offline materials as well. Go out and play, visit a friend, wherever possible. As I say, I've gotten to the point of, I'm trying to let them be bored sometimes, because that's where wonderful creativity comes into. Unplug and play, this comes into the same idea, but getting the whole family to do that can be really, really powerful. Agreeing together appropriate lengths of time that they can use their devices. A family agreement works brilliantly here, where the family sit together and set the rules. It's like we did this with talking about, consequences to things, and kids come up with far harsher punishments than, parents ever would. But working together as a family is a great idea. So it's important to manage time itself as screen time, but remember this idea of the balanced digital diet. Experts agree that we should probably focus more on what children are doing online and less on necessarily how long they are. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the things that we another of the big worries is stumbling across unsuitable sites by accident, whether that's through an app that's been downloaded, whether links they've been sent, chatting to others, searching and finding and following links and things. Lots of different things that you at different times might be called inappropriate. So depending on exposure, reactions to it, age and stage and maturity level of your children, there are lots of different things. So pornographic material, obviously, it is a huge worry for lots of parents. Sites that encourage negative behaviours, crime, racism, eating disorders, even suicide, unfortunately, do exist out there. They might stumble across images of violence or cruelty, and it's really interesting. So, for instance, it's all about maturity levels. It doesn't have to be a bad source or a bad site. If you think about some of the charities and what's going on in the news, it can be incredibly distressing if a child stumbles across it. What's going on in the world with wars, etc. A lot of charities, say it's an animal cruelty charity, will use images and video of, the cause that they're trying to raise awareness or money for. So if a child stumbles across some of those, they're amazing organisations with a fabulous intent, but because the particular child isn't ready to see that yet, it can be really quite upsetting to them. Content containing swearing, and unmoderated chat rooms, and even gambling sites at different ages, these things are going to be of more concern. And it can be really difficult to monitor what your child's viewing, because any internet-enabled device, mobile phones, tablets, can potentially access these sorts of things. And a child's curiosity is really delicate. It's a delicate thing to manage. But there are some programs out there raising awareness. So, as before, a family agreement is a great place to start. And conversations around boundaries. Conversations around, why you maybe shouldn't click on things. You don't want to say, don't click on things because you might see this kind of content, because, of course, the curiosity is then going to send them looking for it. But one thing, it could be talking about, if you ever find something that's upsetting when you're online, here's your strategy to cope with it. That might be turning the tablet screen face down and coming to find a trusted adult who'll remedy the situation, will get rid of that for them. And really, as soon as your child starts to use the internet, it would be great to begin to talk about what they might find there. as they go through, the conversations differ. Obviously, if your child's a bit old, has been on the internet a little bit longer, best time to start was when they were starting. Second best time to start is right now. Okay, so help them understand that they may come across things that they might prefer not to see, and get them open that dialogue, talking to you about it. Helping kids understand that clicking on links, on pop-ups, on unsolicited emails, anything that seems too good to be true, and you start to get in that idea there that, people aren't always what they say they are online. Emails promising that they've won the lottery or promising free gifts or amazing things probably aren't true. Getting them used to that idea, to really think about, who might have sent it or why they might have sent it. Okay. Teach them to ignore pop-ups or block them in your browser settings as well, might be a great thing to do. And supervise where you can. Obviously, a lot easier with younger children, but if you can, try and be in the same room as your child. Doesn't mean that you'll see everything that's on the screen, but you might see your child's reaction, keeping an eye on them, seeing what kind of content they're using. And if they do bring something to you, and if they bring something to you, they're being a digital leader, then praise them. As the kids get older, try and convince them, take the time out to convince them that you respect them, you respect their privacy, but you do still want to make sure that they're safe and make sure that they know they can come to you if anything happens. Because the internet remains a complex place and it wasn't intentionally built for children. So it's not that well regulated. Okay. In terms of some more tools you might want to use, on most smartphones and tablets, there are pre-installed parental controls. Okay, so if you can do this there again before handing over the device is the best time to do, but you can control a variety of functions, restricting, specific features, functions. You can do it based on time. You can do it based on how long they can spend on certain types of apps or what time you want to set some downtime. So on Apple, I think it's called Screen Time. On Android, there's the digital well-being areas that you can take a look at and see what is going to be right for you and for your device. So you can do coverage on each of the family's devices. Obviously, the best time to do it is whilst they're younger, and because as they get older, they'll, I'm sure, learn how to turn these things off. So you can also think about going the next level up, and as well as at device level, think about having filters at broadband level. For most broadband coming into your home, you can limit different kinds of content to different devices, control them via an app, and as I say, set those different things for different devices. It's worth at website level. So things like Google have a safe search. iTunes have something similar where you can switch on family-friendly filters. On YouTube, there's YouTube restricted mode, and we'll also talk a little bit about YouTube Kids. So there are protections much more useful for younger children. Older kids work out how to turn those filters off. But you can also think about the web browser that you use. So individual websites are great. The web browser you use, so if you use Google Chrome, there are different account profiles. So depending on who's browsing, they might be supervised users or managers, getting a good control about how these children are using the internet. When it comes to YouTube, YouTube Kids is a specialized video app which has content tailored towards children. It's specially curated content. It's still created by YouTube creators, but it uses the power of Google systems to try to filter out content that might not be appropriate for kids. It's more of a contained YouTube experience, so they're less likely to follow off funny links that take them somewhere that you wouldn't want them to be. So just to recap, 3 levels really there. You can set boundaries for your child when they get that first connected device, okay? Because once they've got those devices, it can be more difficult to use and change the settings. Second level, is those parental controls on the home broadband and the network, and then safe search on top of that, and family-friendly filters. That's really difficult to say 3 times fast. On different kinds of websites as well. But remember, services like Facebook and YouTube have minimum age limits of 13 for a reason. Don't bow to pressure. Talk to other parents, talk to school, make sure they will tell you that everybody else has them. So should I. But they are 13 for a reason. Okay, so these tools are out there to help you provide safety. But let's take a look at another really challenging area for parents, and that's cyberbullying. Because bullying makes people feel helpless no matter the age you are. But the internet and social media have changed the way, unfortunately, that children experience bullying. So when bullying was face-to-face, I remember when, bullying has been a fact of life for a long time. And it's really interesting to think that for bullying to exist, bullies exist. So when you're talking to your children, it's really important to understand that they might be the victim, but they could also be a perpetrator, and getting them to understand some of these things is really important, because face-to-face bullying used to happen in close quarters. The bullies were known, the victims were kind of known to each other. Unfortunately, with cyberbullying, it can be very anonymous, and a much wider audience. And the hardest thing for me as a parent to get my head around, I guess, is that it doesn't just take place in school or in the street. It can encroach into the home. When I was a kid, no matter what was going on outside, when we shut the door, we were home, we were safe. Okay, I had 3 brothers, still have 3 brothers. So, that didn't mean that there wasn't tough times in the house as well. But it was easier to prove, it was easier to punish, and it didn't follow you home. And that's, for me, I think, the part that really gets me, is that hardness, that difficulty around that. Okay. Young people can now be bullied anywhere, anytime. They can be in the same room as you and you not even know that this is going on. And that's where it's really key that these conversations happening. So in terms of what to look out for, 2 kinds of behaviours that you might notice. One is kids completely stop using their electronic devices. They're upsetting to do with them. Or the opposite, that they become almost obsessed with checking them as to what's going on. Feeling nervous, seeming to be nervous, feeling to be jumpy, closing down devices as you come back. And then, unfortunately, reluctance to leave the house, reluctance to be out there in the real world as well. Unfortunately, the fact is, more time children spend online, the more chance they have of having a negative experience at some point. And about half of all cyberbullying comes from somebody known to the victim. So it's important to know what to look out for, and just as important to know how to have that conversation about it. Okay. So there are different forms of bullying, and this is where it comes into the perpetrator, because when I've discussed these with groups of young people, there's been this kind of penny drop moment. So some of them, harassment, let's talk them through. Harassment is targeting an individual or a group with persistent and offensive messages, which could develop into cyberstalking. Outing is publicly sharing personal, private, or embarrassing information or photos or videos about somebody online. So sharing that funny photo of somebody falling over, that embarrassing moment that they wouldn't necessarily want seen, or sharing private details of somebody's behaviour or sexuality or what have you as well. Trolling is deliberately posting provocative and insulting messages about sensitive subjects or inflicting racism or misogyny on an individual. So going out of somebody's way to wind somebody up is one of the things. Catfishing, stealing somebody's profile or setting up fake profiles to lure people into starting online relationships. This idea that we don't know who people are when they're online. Roasting, which is ganging up on an individual online and sending offensive abuse until the victim is seen to crack. And then the bullies get this great laugh out of, haha, look what we made you do. We wound you up so much that you took that bait, And then griefing is abusing and angering people through online gaming. And as I say, for there to be victims of bullying, there must be perpetrators. And when we speak with a group of young people, just the idea that they didn't really necessarily think, joining that pile-on or sharing that funny video, remembering the effect, because it was online and anonymous, remembering that effect that it had on the people at the centre of those things and getting them to understand and really think that through is really important. So if your child is affected either way with cyberbullying, we've got some advice and we've put it into do's and don'ts. So do find out why. Try and establish the facts around the incident. Keep an open mind, especially, too many of us, you don't want to think that your child might be involved, especially on the perpetration sides of things. So talking about the blurred lines between uploading and sharing content because it's funny and it might get lots of likes, but versus that potential to cause harm, to cause hurt to somebody. Think about teaching by example, modeling positive behavior in your child and praising them as they take this on board. If you receive something funny, not sharing it, making sure that you model, as say, walk that talk, I guess. And above all, help your child. If something happens, help them to learn from it. Think about what you could do differently as a parent. Think about what you could do differently as a family. Think about what they would do next time if the same circumstance occurred. And talk about it. Share that learning with other parents, with other carers. These things can only be explored if we shine light on them. Try not to get upset, stay calm when discussing it with your child. Try to talk through with other adults to work through any emotions that you might be holding about the situation. Don't ignore it. Take the situation seriously. And don't blame somebody else. If it is your child who has been perpetrating this, make sure you take it serious. If your child does come to you and tells you that things are going on, just brush it off, it's just a fact of life, it's just growing up. Really make sure that they feel safe and they feel supported with you. Don't condone it. If your child was cyberbullying in retaliation, then, two wrongs don't make a right, because that just encourages more bullying behaviour in the world. And don't take away their devices. The natural reaction, if something's going on, they're being bullied online, you want to just take that device, protect them from it. But it can actually make the situation worse and might encourage them to find other ways online and not come to you and not be so open with it. Because it's really important to think, nobody likes to think their own child could be a cyberbully, but young people can sometimes be drawn into this behaviour without realising the impact of their actions, which is why it's so important that we do talk. Now, online grooming is known as grooming's used a word to describe people befriending children in order to take advantage of them, often for sexual purposes. And it can be a particularly tricky area to speak to children about. So let's think about some of the things to look out for. And actually, they're along the same sorts of lines as the behavioural change that you might see as with online bullying. Things to look out for: being secretive about who they're talking to online. Or using overly sexual language that you wouldn't expect them to know. So really worrying sign that this is what might be going on. It's really easy to pretend to be somebody else on the internet, and children can sometimes end up having conversations with people whose real identities they don't know. It can happen when children are at home, which can make it really difficult as well. And a really key point is online groomers and face-to-face, but groomers may specifically warn children not to tell anybody about it. One of the rules we've had as a family: if anybody ever tells you not to tell your parents, the first thing you do is you come and talk to me, or one of the other trusted adults. I think, because sometimes they'll say something bad will happen to your parents if you tell them. So making sure that they understand that you will fix, you will help, you won't judge, you will be there, and it's your job to help them out with it. Another thing that happens a lot is switching screens when you come near the computer, closing that lid down, just making sure. It's really interesting. Online groomers are not always strangers. In lots of situations, they might already have met through family or social activities, and then they use the internet to build rapport with the children. And sometimes children and young people don't realise they've been groomed because they think that the person is their boyfriend or girlfriend. It depends on your child's age and maturity level, you know, as to how to handle this. But what's really key is there again, just as with everything else, is the ability to have these conversations. Grooming is a particularly tricky subject to talk about, but so it might be that you talk about, you know, you've read a story when somebody pretended to be somebody they weren't online. So starting with that being, you know, that idea that not everybody is who they say. Have you ever heard of that happening to somebody else? You know, just trying to open up that conversation. I often find these conversations are easier to have side by side than face to face, just because, you know, doing a different activity and getting that conversation, or going for a walk outside and letting that conversation flow. Risk-wise, talking about the risks, making sure your child knows that not everyone is who they say they are. And, you know, asking them to come to you if anyone asks to be friends with them, which includes people they've met through family or social events. Just make sure that you know who they're trying to be friends with. Agree on some rules together. You know, telling your child they should never share personal information about themselves online. That please try to get them to not share pictures of their body online, because, you know, that's where blackmail and things can come in. And they must never, ever, ever meet up with anyone that they have met online. Okay. And in terms of staying engaged, you know, make it a regular review, that you review their social media together. You or a family member you trust might want to be their friend online, just to check they're making sensible choices. And if you do friend them, watch and observe. Don't feel like you're taking part, because then they might find another avenue to go where you aren't there. Lots of you will have a firm grip of what your children are doing online, but it's just worth making sure that you have that open dialogue. Okay. In terms of things you can do to help, best way to deal with grooming is to prevent it happening by making sure your child's well informed, uses privacy settings on social networks, and knows that they can talk to you if they feel unsafe or worried. Starting that dialogue with them young, and remembering that minimum age is 13 on most social networks for a reason. So make sure you update your privacy settings together. Get them to help you update your privacy settings. Talk about locking down those privacy settings for the reason that we don't want the whole world to know about us. If you have any concerns about your child or somebody else's child, you can contact CEOP, who are part of the police, and the police's online safety centre. And they are at ceop.police.uk/safety centre. I'm sure Annie can share that link. And it's, you know, privacy and identity fraud. Just like adults, children may be at risk of having their online identity stolen. It can be difficult to maintain a child's privacy because they might not understand about when to share, what's safe to share online, or what default privacy settings are. So let's have a look at the sort of things. You might start to suspect your child's identity is stolen if they start getting post or bills or emails, anything from organisations that they don't recognise. Receiving letters regarding government benefits, tax payments, you know. And if your child's identity is stolen, it might not be noticed for years, but it could lead to a child being the victim of blackmail, grooming, or bullying. So it's really worth making sure that a few extra things to look out for. Okay, in terms of preventing against identity theft, online privacy settings, really, really important. So every single social networking site, every app they're signed up to, agree with them what they share and with whom. You can take a look at the device settings, make sure the privacy settings on the smartphone and tablet are set high. Make sure, you know, if they're sharing location settings, any app that asks me to share my location, I want to know why it wants to know my location. Sharing of contacts, sharing of photos, sharing of calendars, turning all those things off wherever you can. You can find out what's already out there by searching a couple of search engines with your child's name and see if anything comes up. See what they've shared online already that could make it easier for their identity to be stolen. And closing down, you know, if you can find a publicly available profile that your kids have created, make sure you get that switch taken down. Look and see, what you can find, and then go back and amend those privacy settings. And if your child's identity has been stolen, be sure to tell the affected websites about the problem, and make sure the children are logging in and changing their passwords in order to regain control of those accounts. Okay, just checking in quickly with Annie. I can see no questions. So we've got a little bit of time now just to very quickly think about what we've been talking about all the way through. Is all about this idea of how to talk about online safety, because we have responsibilities as parents and carers and people who care for young people to tackle digital resilience head on. So in terms of some conversation starters, it's important that we don't bury our heads in the sand about technology. So the sooner we can start talking about online safety in an age and maturity appropriate way, the better. Best time was yesterday. Next best time is today. These conversations about digital safety can be a real good two-way street, talking about benefits as well as dangers, and this idea of balance. Talking about, I like this side-by-side idea. You have the conversations when you're doing something else. So it doesn't feel quite so either intimidating or confrontational or highly pressured, that it's just part of what we do, part of what we talk about. Share yourself, share the mistakes you've made, share when you clicked on a link and it led to, signing up for pop-ups or what have you. And making sure it's this idea of talking early, In terms of for parents, you want to teach your child to be inquisitive, but you want to teach them to challenge what they see, what they hear, and what they read online. Not always to believe that first version of what's presented. I want you to make sure you keep the risks in proportion, because they are risks, not harm. Okay, the UK is one of the safest places for children to be online. Keep that communication regular and consistent, and just a part of what we do, like you do with any other aspect of your parenting, I guess. The family agreement is one of the best things I can think of. We all turn our devices off at meal times. We all turn them off an hour before bed. And if any of us ever feel uncomfortable, we will talk to the rest of the family about it. And then it's about setting our young people up for life. How to make sure we don't get obsessed with our social media profiles and social media images, that we have a positive self-image, and that we do things that are outside the realms of the internet and be in real life as well, will all help to foster that resilience. Lots of resources that we can help with that we've spoken about Family Link, we've spoken about CEOP. I've introduced you to internetmatters.org if you didn't know about them. Childline is still around, and the Internet Watch Foundation have lots of things to be helpful. One I haven't mentioned yet is the Be Internet Legends program. So Be Internet Legends is a free program that is based, it's for Key Stage 2, so it's for primary school age children. It's a gamified way of learning in a really safe, friendly way about these strategies for protecting ourselves. So thinking about before we're sharing, checking things are real. So playing games where you go through Interland, and free game, easy to navigate. It helps the children, but it also helps parents to overcome badly behaved hackers, phishers, oversharers and bullies, and practicing the skills that you need to be confident online. You can also sign the schools up. So if your school isn't involved already, head to parentzone.org.uk, where there are interactive assemblies. The Interland online game can be used in terms of by the schools as well, and there are special schools resources available as well. Okay, I can check from Annie that we haven't had any questions that she needs me to answer, which is quite good because, as usual, I have run completely out of time. So what would be great for you to do is if you could pop into the chat, have a think about any next steps you want to take. Is it to set up that family agreement? Is it to look at those privacy settings, both for your own and your kids' accounts, or set up the devices to make sure you use the digital well-being tools for yourself as well as for your children? Got two feedback areas. It would be great if you could we have a survey that's been designed specially for this program. That's the goo.gl/BixJ6Y. Don't know why it's such a funny little thing, but I'll ask Annie to share it for you. All that remains for me to do is to thank you for joining me today. I hope you found it of some use. If you want to get in touch with us, we're on #DigitalGarage. And we are, as I say, running tons more webinars that hopefully you'll find useful. Check out the link in the description that'll take you through to our website where you'll be able to find what else is going on. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time today. Annie and I look forward to welcoming you back to another Google Digital Garage training session sometime soon.